Welcome to the conference, track 2, the first of 2 workshops on workforce development, good jobs for women, getting business on board. I am Susan Moir, your moderator of this. I'm just looking up to see what I wrote we were going to do here today. How y'all doing? Good. Very glad to have you here. Did I already have a question? Oh, okay. I thought that was good. We hadn't even said anything. We already had questions. I'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to do. I'm going to quickly introduce the panel. So I'm going to take that away from them so that we can get that done quickly. I'm going to present this case study on getting women into the construction workplace, into construction trades, briefly, and then our panelists are going to make some comments from their own place in the stakeholder landscape. So you're, oh my God, I don't know if I got everybody's. Sue Mailman, Coghlin Electric, the CEO. John Barros, what is your title? Director of Workforce Development?
No, Chief Economic Development of the city.
Chief Economic Development, City of Boston. Marcy Reed, the big boss at National Grid. Okay. Yeah. Brian Doherty, one of like at least a dozen Brian Dohertys, but this one you really need to know, in Boston. Don't try Googling, and don't try finding a picture of him. So he's in hiding. Brian is the general agent of the Metropolitan Boston Building Trades Council. And Gail Kinney, what's your title this panel, Gail?
Eclectic Workforce Development Consultant.
Eclectic Workforce Development. Please come in and sit down. Let me start with a criticism of workforce development, because this may be the anti-workforce development workshop. The workforce development industry is much too focused on businesses' needs and not enough on the needs of the citizens and the workers of our society and our economy. I'll give you one example of this. I attended, it's back 6 or 7 years ago, I attended a breakfast, an annual breakfast by one of the major workforce development partners in the city of Boston. This was back when we were first forming the policy group on tradeswomen's issues, which I'm going to talk to you about at the case study. I attended this breakfast, and it was a nice hotel, Union Hotel, downtown. Room was packed, food was pretty good. They talked a lot about the training programs, and they had some workers who had been through some of the training programs that they had been involved in. Very well-funded organization, nationally known. I will not name them. And then they asked the employers in the room to stand up. One guy who owned a body shop was in the room. It was the only employer in the room. The agenda was much more focused, and they didn't need to be in the room, because the workforce development industry has traditionally responded to the we need workers plea, as opposed to what kind of jobs do we want? What kind of jobs do people need? If we're really talking about equality and getting out of poverty, what kind of jobs do we need? We do not need more $9 and $10 jobs, or Massachusetts $10 jobs, for people who are on unemployment, because for most of them, that's a pay cut. Not from unemployment, but from their previous job. So let me start with the case study we were going to present to you. It is called the Policy Group on Tradeswomen's Issues. Excuse me a second. And 3 of the folks on this panel have in some way been involved in that. PGTI, we call it. It is a multi-stakeholder collaboration. We've had open meetings involving labor, contractors, this is about construction, labor, contractors, developers, governments, and research, every other month for 8 years. We are not a coalition. We are not an organization. We have no legal standing. We have met every other month, usually at a union hall, for 8 years to address a 2-part mission. One is crushing the barriers to good jobs in construction for women, crushing those barriers. And the second is, we've set a goal, we've had this goal for about 3 years now, 20% women in the trades by the year 2020. That is our goal. Why construction? Well, first of all, construction is the worst example of occupational segregation in our economy. Worst, not only in the terms of the 2% women who have had opportunities in that. During the 40 years, we've had federal written, people call them policies, federal unenforced law that would mandated the increase of women in this industry. 40 years, the worst case of occupational segregation. And the pay equity for women in the unionized construction sector is 100%. A woman who works as a carpenter in this city makes exactly the same as a man who works as a carpenter. A woman who works as a laborer or a mechanic or an operator or a pipe fitter makes 100% every hour that the man working beside her does. That's mandated by contract. Now, let me say, there is a pay discrepancy, and that is an annual discrepancy. And that discrepancy is due to child care responsibilities, inability to take so much overtime, and perhaps patterns of laying off and not hiring due to gender. But when she goes to work, she makes 100%. Now, so PGTI, 8 years we've been doing this. What are our outcomes? Well, let me give you our quantitative outcomes to begin with. We have 3 times as many women in the trades in the greater Boston area and in Massachusetts as we had in 2012. Those are our best numbers. Our best data is from the City of Boston and from the Division of Apprenticeship Standards and from this campus right here. 3 times as many women. We have increased from 2 to 2.5% in the state to 7% apprentices as of last quarter. These are modest gains. It is still a completely crummy number to say that there are only 7% apprentices in this state. And we have much room to grow. But our other outcome is the creation by the policy group on tradeswomen's issues, and I'll say that the co-conveners of the policy group on tradeswomen's issue are where I work here at the Labor Resource Center at UMass Boston, the Metropolitan Building Trades Council of the greater Boston area, the New England Regional Council of Carpenters, and the Massachusetts AFL-CIO. We are the co-conveners. We are the informal leadership group that pulls it all together. We have coordinated all of those stakeholders, including who's here from the Women's Bureau? Drive me crazy. They were all sent to some other workshop. I'm like, you're part of this. You should be here. The Women's Bureau, working with the Regional Women's Bureau, working with the Regional Office of Apprenticeship here in Boston, working with the City of Boston, working with contractors all over the area, working with 17 building trades unions. We have created together a set of best practices. We have a website. You can download them. Should you be, let's say, my friend Marcy here, should you be the head of a major organization that does construction, you can go on our website, you can download Finishing the Job, best practices for increasing diversity in the construction workplace, and you can, you leave a little footer on the bottom that says, oh, PGTI had something to do with this. Put your own company logo on it, rip it off, it's there in Word, and implement it in your place of business. That is a series of checklists, customized checklists for each stakeholder, for owners, for developers, for general contractors, for subcontractors, for labor unions, for community organizations, and just recently added in the last 6 weeks for apprenticeship and training programs. How do you actually, because we're talking to the hopeful. We're not talking. Most of the time, we don't spend our time talking to the dinosaurs who are like, this isn't a business for girls. And we stopped asking the question a long time ago, do women want these jobs? As I say many times, no. Rather than be out there in that hole at $35 an hour, women would rather work in a nursing home moving 300-pound patients and wiping up poop for $10 an hour. Everybody knows that women, are really about service and not about self. There is absolutely, there's plenty. I have written the paper with Krista Kelleher, who's also here in another workshop. I've written the paper that says the answer to the question is why women, why women don't want to be in this industry is men have kept them out. Okay, that's done. The research question is, how can we get them in? And that's what we've created, this set of best practices. We have a couple of sets of different best practices. Those best practices were tested and proven right here on this campus. The Integrated Science Complex, the building that you passed on the way in, well, you didn't because you came by the shuttle bus. The building you may drive by one day when there's parking here again. That building had 10% women on it every single day for the entire time it was being constructed. These are proven best practices. Those best practices are now being implemented on over $3 billion worth of work in Massachusetts. That includes both the casinos that are being built, all the UMass Building Authority, and a bunch of other projects around the city. And we hope soon to be formally implemented in the city of Boston with all the contractors on the city. So finally, before I throw it out to my panelists, let me say that in terms of the eggheads in the room, I'm the egghead in this project. I'm looking for young scholars who want to go into the sexy business of getting more women into construction, because I want to retire. So if you know that woman, please send her to me. What is the research angle here? Well, I do participatory research. I was glad to hear the Center for Women in PPP to be described as an action research center. The research that we do is policy implementation. I differ from some of my colleagues in this. I have colleagues who want to get that new policy out of the Department of Labor that they've been saying would be out next week for 3 years. I have very close colleagues who really want the Department of Labor to redo the 1978 Jimmy Carter created Executive Order 11242. I say, screw that. What we need is mechanisms for implementing the policies we have. Let's get new policies when we actually know how to implement what we already have. When nationally we reach 6.9%, a silly number that apocryphally was invented by Rosalind Carter, when we actually have the 6.9% that is mandated by the federal government in construction across the country, then let's talk about 10%. Oh, we might talk about 10% today, or 12%. We might talk about 12% today, too. We have 10% on every project with the UMass Building Authority here on in Boston because it's in the city of Boston. So policy implementation is the angle. That's the case study. We have shown success. We've not anywhere near what we need to be. But I'm going to throw it to my colleague and co-convener at PGTI. The panelists are going to have some brief remarks, and then we're going to throw it out because we really want to talk about how do we get women into good jobs. So I'll send it to Brian, say a few words.
Good afternoon.
Pull that a little closer.
And thank you, Susan. Appreciate the opportunity to be here with everyone. Actually, first, before we go any further, this is very important work, and no one has put more into it, and no one has much more time creating relationships and partnerships to advance it than Susan Moir. So we can give her a big round of applause, please. Thank you for the opportunity today. So I work with the building and construction trades unions in the greater Boston region. And just a little bit of background on that. That's an organization that represents about 35,000 workers in greater Boston with 3,300 signatory union companies. And what I mean by signatory union companies is just that they have a collective bargaining agreement that has been fairly negotiated between management and labor to create the standards that we represent in this region. And the standards we represent in this region are pretty simple. It's family supporting wages, it's full health care benefits for every individual worker and their entire family, and a dignified retirement after years worth of a career. So that's a little bit of the building trades in a nutshell. Historically, when we own every bit of this, historically it is and still is a very white male dominated industry, and we have to change that. And the building trades in this region have identified that and are working toward it. It hasn't always been that way, and where I'll start this piece of it is about 2011. Susan and some of her colleagues and friends were doing some great work, and there was a big transition at the Building Trades Council. A state representative at the time, who's now Mayor Walsh, was elected to become the new general agent for the building trades. He came in and he said this. He said, the building trades does great things. Wages, benefits, helps families, but it doesn't do it for every family. There are too many communities that are out of this fortunate opportunity for careers. There are too many groups of people that don't have access to this, and we have to change it. So he put initiatives in place. He created partnerships with outside groups. He started to change the trend toward more social and economic justice. He ran that for 2 years before he stepped aside to run for mayor. So in 2013, there was a whole group of us, 75 representatives from the Building Trades Council said, this is exactly the work we should be doing. It was a transformative moment that he had a huge hand in with folks like Susan and others, and said, let's keep going in this direction. So we put these policies in place to keep going that way. The long and short of it is this 20% by 2020, we fully support it. We fully support it as building trades unions. And we were fortunate enough to have elected officials that get it, contractors who are supporting it. The unions are behind it with co-conveners like Susan and academics and community groups. But there was a major convening at the BCEC about 2 years ago. It was hundreds and hundreds of our partner contractors came into one room, a major convention in the city of Boston, and said, if we're going to continue to build this region, we're going to do it in a more fair, equitable way that allows for positive economic development to be shared economic prosperity. That was the goal of that event, and we've been going in that direction since. So I'm here to say that as a representative of unions, we're here and we support it. We feel pretty good about our contractor base that is also supportive of these efforts. And on a more societal note, here's why we think it's important. When you come into your first day in the construction unions, you are making about $20. That's a family supporting wage. It's not enough. After about 6 months, you should get about a 10% raise, up to somewhere in this region where you're collecting an income or making an income of about $75,000 to $90,000 per year. That is what is required now to have a working existence. I don't like the term middle class. I don't like the term, that is not wealth. Because workers in this region, you can do 3 things with money. You can spend it, you can save it, or you can invest it. And the folks that we represent can only do one. They can only spend it on rent, on food, on making sure they have health care. They are not in the tax bracket where they are thinking about what is their next investment. So it's a family supporting wage. And that's why it's incumbent upon the unions in this region. And I think that we're hoping that folks are starting to hear us. This is about income inequality. This is about the gender gap. This is about disparities in racial equality. And these are the things that we have been focusing on for about 5 years. And it should have been 500, but it hasn't. But for the next years, we are looking in this direction to keep moving this agenda forward. So I just want to simply say, I would ask this. There are a lot of folks that do this work. We're the unions. We are always seeking partnerships, but there are other voices out there. If you can champion this voice alongside us, that anyone who goes to work should be able to provide for their families and themselves. Anybody that steps out of the house that day to support themselves should have these benefits wrapped around them, healthcare benefits and retirement, in a safe workplace. And that's what we're asking. So when you have this conversation, please identify your partners and start pushing this agenda. Unions are helping, and we want to keep helping. So let's start pushing that along, that every worker deserves these rights, union or non-union. We're pushing it, and we want it to be for everyone. So please, I would put that on the table. Again, no matter what you look like, where you come from, what you sound like, if you want a career working with your hands to support yourselves and your families, join the building trades unions. There are no barriers. You have to be 18 plus, and just about after that, you just have to have the interest in working with us, and we'll help you get the rest of the way. So I'll leave it there, Susan, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel.
Thank you, Brian. Before passing it on to Sue, I wanted to add another fact, just piling on one of the things you said. We have enough data from the city of Boston to know that half of the women who are going into the trades now are women of color. So this not only addresses gender disparities, it also addresses racial disparities. It will make a significant difference in the demographics, but also the culture of the building trades as those women come up through their apprenticeship and into their time. And I'll pass it on to Sue, is a signatory contractor, signed with the union. Sue, I'll pass it on to you.
Okay, so next time Susan asks me to be on a panel, I'll definitely say yes, because she is a lot of fun to listen to. So my company is Coghlin, Susan, Coghlin Electric in
Sorry, I did the Gaelic pronunciation.
in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I am 4th generation in my family, and it will not surprise anybody in this room, the first female to run the business. And it's been, because I'm in Worcester, and because I'm a decent-sized business, we employ 200 to 400 IBEW electricians across New England and New York as well. I get asked to sit on a lot of committees, do a lot of work, and there was a very strong female leader, reminds me of Susan, her name was Lois Green in Worcester, and she said, if you get asked to serve on a committee, to sit on a board or whatever, do it, because that is our responsibility, and obviously that's why all of you are here today, so I try to do that. Right now, The committees that I'm working on that have a lot to do with this discussion are about vocational education. I hope our governor is going to change his from charter schools to vocational schools, which I know he's a fan of. But let's take all those dollars and put the efforts into the good-paying jobs, not only construction, but manufacturing, skilled trades, where there's just so much need to get there. A couple of other committees that I'm on that matter here are Division of Apprenticeship and Training. So Massachusetts has an unbelievable apprenticeship system, and we are at the forefront of the country. I don't know where we're going in these next 4 years. None of us do. We're all wondering. My hope was that if Hillary had been elected, we would have proceeded with efforts along the apprenticeship, and I hope those will still continue. And they may, because it is about good jobs and building those things. But here's the deal. We need to encourage cities, gateway cities, Worcester, Springfield. There's so much, Brian, at your fingertips here in Boston, and we don't necessarily in our other cities have those things at our fingertips. So we need to encourage owners, cities, that we need policies that say, we want you to hire contractors that have apprenticeship systems. We want to these goals. Mass gaming is going to be so important right now for the trajectory that it's going to send us. And we need these goals for city employment, for building development organizations in different cities that we're in. And we should all be voices and advocates of that, because when we're building in our cities, we say economic development equals workforce development equals economic development. And so I'm pretty passionate about that, and help us create these training programs. Construction apprenticeship is an awesome model, and it can be replicated over other organizations. And I'll shut up and let the next person speak.
Thank you, Sue. Let me send it to Marcy. You also employ people?
I do. I do. What was my title again? I can't remember.
Big boss.
As the big boss, whatever. Actually, my job, I'm the president of National Grid in Massachusetts. And so what that means is we have 15,000 employees. 60% of our employees are represented by various unions, locals across the Northeast. My job within Massachusetts is to keep the lights on and the gas flowing if you happen to be a National Grid customer. When I joined the company 28 years ago as an accountant, I was one of very few women even in the accounting department. Never got to see our physical workforce until maybe about 3 years later, when I had to do a field trip with accounting to go count some coal in a pile someplace. And I realized there's a whole different world out there. Anyway, time has passed, and I now have the very humbling opportunity to run the joint. And I will tell you that we have a long way to go. We have done a lot, but we've really just begun. 30% of the employees at National Grid are women, so it tells you we're still quite male-dominated. The industry is male-dominated. When I go to industry conferences and different meetings, still sometimes I'm the only woman in the room, if you can believe that. So 30% of women overall. As for, though, what I will call the non-traditional roles, and we have plenty of them in our company. Start with the engineering staff. So a couple stats. 13% of college engineering students in America, 13% are females. 30% of the engineers at National Grid are female. And it's because we make a conscious effort to go out and hire these people. In fact, I was beating the shit out of someone this morning at a breakfast who comes from, excuse me, I didn't really mean to say that.
That's quite all right.
That's what the big boss does.
My mother still yells at me when I curse. I was speaking to a woman from one of our local women's colleges here in the area this morning, and she was telling me all about their STEM program, and I got all juiced up over it. And she said, "Would you come speak?" I said, "Yes, I want to speak to your engineering graduates." And she said, "Oh, we don't have any engineering graduates." I said, "Okay, well, when you get a program, I'll come speak." But because what we like to do is go to not engineering colleges and find the women, we actually like to go to women colleges and find the engineers, because then it's a lot easier for us. That's why we have 30% of our engineers as women. But we don't have 30% in our construction crew. So we've got basically 3 types of physical workforces in the group. We've got, we'll start with probably the least best performing right now. So in our gas business, we have less than 5% of our represented folks are female, less than 5%. These are folks who are out digging trenches, driving dump trucks and backhoes, fitting pipe, welding, that type thing, less than 5%. We do, unbelievably, even though we only have less than 5%, we have 2 all-female crews. And I can tell you they are more productive than any other crew in the entire US footprint that we have. So, and I love them. Does anyone here live in Winchester? The last job that they did, I actually went to visit them. They were fixing a gas leak in Winchester. And when I visit some other crews, it'll take them all day long to fix the leak. And I show up at like 8 o'clock on this job. They had already been at it for a half hour. And they said, hey, we'll be out of here before lunch. What's after that? And I was like, women just get it done. Anyway, so that's on the gas side. On the electric side, we have about 10%, just shy of 10% of our physical workforce are women. They are line workers, they are design techs, they're splicers, they're supervisors. We have some supervisors in the gas business as well. They, like their male counterparts, go out when the storm comes in, and they're up in the bucket in the 30-mile-an-hour winds, putting your power back on just like anyone else. And yes, they do it just as well as anyone else, Susan. So we don't have any all-female crews there, although that's just by happenstance. We have obviously enough to have all-female crews. But what I love about those 2 groups, before I get to the next one, is they felt lonely, and as they should, by the way. They asked me about 2 years ago, I want to say, 2 years ago, could they start a group called Winter? So we have a women's employee resource group. It's called WIN, Women in Networks. They wanted to start a group called Winter, Women in Non-Traditional Roles. And you had to have like basically a certain job in order to be in this group. And I said, yeah, let's do it. And so they kicked themselves off, I want to say a couple of years ago, and basically what they're, not only just to share experiences with themselves on some of the experiences they have on the workplace, everything from literally job type questions to almost, providing support for each other, but they deal with mentoring, awareness, training. I personally do a lot for them. I give them all the experiences that they want. Some of them want to become supervisors in that space. Some of them just want to continue to be a line worker for the rest of her career before we then, thank you, hand them a very nice pension, I will say. And they have this group, which I'm really glad for, because though it hasn't had a massive impact yet, I know it has attracted other women to their roles. I know it will only just continue to snowball. So I'm really glad that they started. And they did that on their own. They started that up. The other group where we have probably the most success is a group called CMS, Customer Meter Services. These are the bulk of National Grid employees that are out working in the streets. You see our little vans all over the place. These are CMS techs. They typically work alone. They're doing everything from first responders. When you smell gas, you get out of the house first, by the way, then you use your cell phone. They're the ones who show up. So they're first responders, they're meter techs, they're service techs. There are supervisors and managers in there as well. 16 to 18%, sort of depending on the season, 16 to 18% of that group are women. And they love their jobs. They're out with people, they're out driving around, enjoying the outdoors, doing a great job. So some of the things I think about how we can continue to do better at this, because for me, whether it's 5%, 10%, or 16 to 18%, none of those numbers are representative of the rest of our company, nor our customer base for that matter. We, like Sue, continue to do a lot in the schools. I'm a huge fan of Worcester Tech Vocational School and a bunch of other vocational schools. I'm so glad. Huge fan of the programs out there, and we do the best job we can to steal those students to come work for us. We also work closely with the community colleges in the state, and give the students who come in to our programs that are pretty well thought out, hands-on experience. So they don't come in, we have a bunch of engineering students who come in because they want to ultimately be an engineer at National Grid. I'll tell you a story. There's one guy named Matt who I met. He's an engineering student in college right now. He's probably a sophomore. He came into this program we have called the Pipeline. And on his first part of the program is we give you a summer job every 3 years, all the 3 years of your college, and then as long as you get a B, we'll hire you. Well, his first summer job was actually as a construction worker. And he told me after the summer that he wasn't going to go back to college because he wanted to be a construction worker. I told him I'd fire him if he did that. And he had to finish his schooling that he was signed up for, but then when he came back, he could be a construction worker. We basically turned what he wanted to do with his life by giving him the construction job. Now, it's a guy, I realize that, but it could happen to anyone that I would have had that experience with. So between the school programs, the winter group that I talked about, and then just what I would call in our group strong partnerships between management and the union. We proudly work together. We know we are all one team. We provide a vital service to our customers, allowing you to have energy in your homes and businesses, and we couldn't do it without each other, and we know that. So I'll shut up. There's a lot more I could talk about.
Thank you, Marcy. Thank you. Let me throw it to Gail for a maybe a more regional perspective before we come back to the city here.
Okay, well, good afternoon to everybody. I have 1 foot in Connecticut and 1 foot in New Hampshire. And somebody just asked me, what's up with that? You know, what happened with Massachusetts? But it seems like there's so much power in Massachusetts that I can just skip right over, right? But what I'm doing right now is working with the state AFL-CIOs and their charitable foundations, their 501c3s, and with a number of other labor organizations on the new kind of workforce development, Susan, not the same old, same old. I just want to say that I work on a consultant basis now, but for a number of years I worked with the national AFL-CIO, and I worked in their economic development and workforce development departments. And part of my job was, and this was actually, we got some federal grant money to do this, was to demystify for unions and labor organizations, first the Job Training Partnership Act. People remember the oldies and goodies, or not so goodies, and then the Workforce Investment Act, and now we've got Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. But anyway, folks who are intimate in this kind of stuff, quite frankly, they speak a different language than we do. And so, you know, just even to access that kind of stuff is you need to demystify the language. So I've been sort of immersed in that. And as part of my work with the AFL-CIO, I worked with labor representatives on various workforce boards. And that meant sometimes I went with them to their workforce board meetings to try to help them to, again, break into this different language and this very heavy kind of stuff that to working folk sometimes didn't make a lot of sense, right? So I will say that back to what Susan said at the very beginning, I sat in meeting after meeting after meeting where people, both businesses and then people who are parroting businesses said, oh, well, we can't find workers. And I can't tell you how many times I said, wait a minute, make them finish the sentence. We can't find workers who are willing to work for $8 or $9 an hour. That was the rest of the sentence that was unspoken. The whole, you know, issue of good jobs was really for many workforce development entities not on the table. It was, let's get our numbers of people who are employed. You know, do we really care how much they make? But that's sort of the past. So the topic of this, right, a little bit of the present too, Brian says. So part of, I think, the name of this this workshop today was engaging businesses in hiring more women, something like that. So I want to say that, again, with my AFL-CIO work and engaging with departments of labor and workforce boards across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, which is where I worked, many tens of thousands of dollars have been spent on workshops and think tanks and brainstorming sessions of how to engage business in the system. And just quite frankly, I don't think there's really any magic bullet. I don't believe that there's a single bullet, and I don't think that anything spectacular has come out of all that investment in engaging businesses per se. But in terms of businesses and women, I would say something that to me comes closer than anything else, quite frankly, is the policy group on tradeswomen's issues. And I think that the work that's been done there and the research can be extrapolated beyond construction, quite frankly. And I think it's the best thing that's happened for women and frankly employers in a long, long time. But I want to just say really quickly, I want to touch on highlight four things, and it's the power of unions, the Margaret Mead approach, the power of critical mass, and then I believe that we are in a moment of opportunity right now before things may fall apart, and I think we want to take advantage of that. So just really quickly, again, in sitting in these workforce boards, and talking about how do we engage business? How do we get to business? They won't talk to us. I call them. I call the HR. What do? They won't return my calls or whatever. And this is not true everywhere, but it's true enough so that I think it's worth thinking about. I've said, again, on numerous occasions to folks lamenting the fact that they didn't even know how to get a return phone call, from National Grid or anyplace else. Sometimes there's visionaries at the top. Sometimes folks at the top have never been engaged in the question about hiring women with intentionality. But the point about engaging unions is, I've said, have you ever thought that wherever there is a union, there's an employer? Unions don't exist without employers. There is a signatory employer every time a union exists in your community. And so one way of even getting to talk to employers is to engage the union. And in my experience, as often as not, if there is somebody or some bodies in the union movement like Brian who is passionate about bringing women into non-traditional workforces, that passion then can be brought up from the union to their employer partners. And that's as effective a way of getting powerful labor management partners together to actually do something, again, with intentionality about bringing more women into the workforce. And then again, with union contracts, the point that Susan made, if it's a union contract you're talking about, there is no pay disparity between the males and the females doing the same job in the workplace. So think about unions in ways that you never have before if you want to do something new and different, creative about engaging more businesses in thinking about bringing more women in. The Margaret Mead approach is simply, we've heard this a million times, but never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And again, what in my experience, to get something going, even as radical and as dramatic as your commitment in National Grid or the commitments that are happening in Boston economic development, takes a couple of people. One or two people initially with passion can make a difference. And I just want to give a shout out particularly. So Boston, obviously, with Brian, has been the leader in terms of women in construction. But there is a woman who is in her third decade now of being a carpenter. She started off as an apprentice. And she said that she spent her first decade of entering being a carpenter, of trying to figure out the trade and trying to be a good carpenter. She said she spent the second decade trying to figure out her union and deciding she wanted to be a union leader. And now she says she's in her third decade, and she is spending her third decade trying to bring women into the trades and getting to 20% by 2020, and then even moving up from there. And her name is Liz Skidmore. Yes. And I worked with Liz. Liz is actually, for a time, was in New Hampshire and was a union leader in New Hampshire. And so I got to know her with my work in New Hampshire, and I saw the passion. And the passion then, so Liz was doing this great work in Massachusetts, but we decided together, we're going to bring that passion to New Hampshire. And it really was Liz, just with one or two other people, that she turned on to this, that all of a sudden, New Hampshire in its own New Hampshire kind of Yankee way is trying to emulate, what Boston is doing. We will never be a Boston. We'll never even be a Worcester or a Springfield. But, there is potential there. And it is due to the passion of one person. And one person, passion is contagious. It can be contagious. And so look for the person or the persons with passion. Begin there. and then it can bubble up. The real action can bubble up from there. There's no mystery to that, the Margaret Mead approach. I just want to say that the more, there's a point at which critical mass becomes important. We're not quite there yet in most places. We're getting there with National Grid in terms of critical mass, to the point where we are normalizing women so that it doesn't become an odd conversation to have or a radical conversation, or we don't have to have any more of these workshops about women because it's just normal. And you're talking about creating the next workforce, bringing in the next generation of workers, not just female workers. And so again, if we can find the partners or somebody with passion who has already begun normalizing the fact that women ought to be 50% of any workforce, of any individual workforce, if we're 50% of the workforce nationally or thereabouts, find those normalizers and bring them in to help, again, spread the passion to folks and to employers who aren't there yet. And just finally, I want to say that we are, in some ways, we're in a moment of opportunity, even though, quite frankly, for myself, I am in also a moment of great fear about what's coming next for this nation. But thanks to Joe Biden in particular, President Joe Biden, who is passionate about registered apprenticeship and passionate about developing the next workforce, and his wife Jill, who works in a community college, he moved mountains to try to really dump as much investment, federal investment, as he possibly could in registered apprenticeship and with new ways of working and new partnerships with community colleges before their administration ended. And so we now have two major grant funds that have already been funneled out, one just very recently awarded, that are either will be alive for the next 3 years, or one is a year old, or the next 4 years going forward, that unless something radical happens, will probably still be living in localities, no matter what happens at the national level. And this is, just really quickly, one is called the American Apprenticeship Initiative, the other is called the Apprenticeship Expansion Grants, and they have been three of the expansion grants have been awarded in Massachusetts. One, I think, at least one is Boston specific. In Vermont, in Connecticut, in New Hampshire, and then the American Apprenticeship Initiatives, which still have four more years of shelf life. Again, the Department of Career Services, the Massachusetts Department of Career Services, the Department of Labor in Connecticut, the community college system of New Hampshire, I think, and the Vermont Department of Labor. But there's all this money out there in New England at this point that is ready to be invested in apprenticeship. And I guarantee you that each one of those entities, no matter what you're doing, will be very, very interested in investing some of that money and bringing more women in. And so let's look at those opportunities. Let's jump on them, that even as we mourn that things might not look all that great for us in a couple of years in terms of the national landscape, that there are local opportunities that can be shaped if everybody here in the room commits to going back to your community and engaging, finding who's in charge of those grants and engaging in that. So anyway, that's that.
Thank you, Gail. The city of Boston has had the nation's highest standard for women in construction and the strongest legislative protection, the Boston Resident Jobs Policy, for gender, race, and residency since the 1980s. Implementation has been spotty through those years, but now we're at a new administration. And let's hear from you, John. Where are you going with it?
Thanks, appreciate it. And so I do recognize that the facilitator of this panel asked me to be brief, and so I will be brief.
Oh, no, talk on forever.
Okay. But proud to be here. This is really exciting.
25 minutes.
25 minutes? Yeah, right. This is really important work for economic development. And this is not just about doing good. This is about making sure that we have a healthy, thriving economy. And if women don't participate in our economy, it cannot be healthy and thriving. I can go in all types of reasons, but you know those reasons. So Mayor Walsh makes this a priority. We've had a Boston residence job policy since 1983. And in fact, the implementation or oversight of that policy has been spotty. But let me tell you, when you put effort behind it, you can hit those goals. Our goals are 50% Boston residents, 25% minority, and 10% women. And the projects that want to hit those goals can hit those goals, and it matters. Tell about a personal experience that I had working with the buildings trade when I was the executive director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative in Roxbury. We were building the Kroc Center. And in building the Kroc Center, we partnered with the trades and looked at the general contractor and said, look, here are our goals. It's 51, 51, 15, right? And we want to up all of the Boston goals, and we want 15% women on the job. And we worked, and we worked, and we stole women from other jobs. But it was true. And we didn't hit 15% women. I think we were at 13% women. Proud of our 13%, but I left that project, and we were proud because we killed minority, something like 60%. We beat the 51% Boston residents, but on women, we fought hard and fought hard. And what that left me with, what I came after that project with was, it's got to be about the pipeline. It's got to be about those practices that you talked about earlier. We have to make sure that the goals can be met, and it's critical. And I'll say this, the demographics of the city has changed. The mayor wants to make a statement. We're gonna look at Boston's current goals. Unfortunately, right now, we have, I think, since 2010 to 2015, have increased women on construction jobs that are facilitated by the government tenfold, but it's only 6%, right? We've got a lot of work to do in this area. The mayor is gonna look at these goals. He's gonna send a statement soon. I can't tell you what the new goals will be, but we're gonna send a statement that we're really serious about this. So part of that statement is goals, but the more important part of that statement, I think, is in meeting those goals. So apprenticeships. You talked about 7% in Massachusetts not being a strong number. For me, it's about the trend. We're heading in the right direction. From 2 to 7% is the right direction. The kind of monies that we have out there that we're using to make sure that we're increasing the pipeline and the partnership that we have with trades, we've got all of the different elements. We just now have to get behind each other and push, right? Not sure what the hell happened with the election, but let's just continue to push. So we did, in fact, get a American Apprenticeship Initiative grant. And so the Greater Boston American Apprenticeship Initiative is important. It's a $3 million grant awarded in October 2015 from the Obama administration to expand apprenticeship opportunities in construction and hospitality through the Office of Workforce Development. Let me say something about good jobs. I know there are some powerful folks out there pushing us locally and throughout the country in our advocacy for unions. But I'm proud to say as a public servant that we have strong unions in Boston and that we need more good jobs. And I don't shy away from it. So we are, in fact, partnering with the unions on these apprenticeships. And the city's award, which is part of the $175 million of apprenticeship grant money that's out there, will serve 394 participants seeking to advance via careers in the construction and hospitality sectors. It'll offer an accelerated path to skilled jobs with several benefits. Participants in the initiative will have access to training opportunities, college credentialed programs that could increase their earnings from the state's minimum wage to initial union wages of $16 per hour or journeyman wages of $21 per hour or higher, depending on occupation and education attainment. This is critical, right? The earn to learn model is really important. But the important thing on this is the focus on this initiative and the work with the unions that we're doing now are making sure that we are engaging groups that are underrepresented, women, minorities, and others who are not in skilled labored positions. And it's important that we continue to do that, but I want to mention another program that I think is equally as important as the apprenticeship programs, and that is the pre-apprenticeship programs. And so we're excited here in Boston to have a partnership with the Building Pathways program. And the Building Pathways program is a really important program that we partner with the unions on and right now, I want to say the last two cohorts have had 97% people of color, and 50% women participants. And 100%, and Brian, you're going to correct me if I'm wrong here, 100% of those who have graduated from the Building Pathways programs have gone on to apprenticeships and have moved forward in this program. And those are the kinds of pathways we have to see. The pre-apprenticeships to the apprenticeships to the journeyman, right? But we've got to create the kind of ecosystem and the support that allows us to do that. And if we don't have the relationships and if we don't have the funding, then we're in trouble. Despite what happens with the federal government, we have to partner locally because we believe in this. We have to partner locally because we think we can get the best products, because we think we have the best workforces, and because we think the partnerships make sense. So in the next 4 years, my guess is we're going to be having a lot of these conversations. Government's got to be at the table, unions got to be at the table, and the employers have to be at the table, have more conversations like this to make sure that these kind of programs and this kind of work continues on. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions already? Before I put out my questions here? First hand here, and then you did it.
Yeah, so it's a combined question between what all you guys said. So Sue and I are both on the Community Labor Coalition, and we address a lot of these issues, and interestingly enough, we're about to pick our next issue, and the weird thing is it might end up being organizing around childcare, because for 3 years we've been worried about this pipeline, and not many of the numbers for women have changed, and they haven't changed because we haven't changed the culture of how we take care of our families, how we take care of all of the rest of it. But then as a small business owner as well, because our education system is so focused on testing, we're not teaching some of these soft skills. And even in a simple juice bar like mine, I have to go through 10 employees to find the one good one. I know in my parents' generation for a fact that wasn't the case. And it's because we're so focused on teaching to the test that we're forgetting to teach kids how to treat customers, how to...
Let's focus on women.
Correct.
And their opportunities.
Correct.
There's a much bigger question than this workshop.
But I'm bringing it to the end, and I'm sorry that I'm verbose. The end part is that a lot of people invest in the BOC thing, and then they invest in the apprenticeship, and then there's a few folks that can go into building pathways. But where I see the biggest gaps is that in these short in-between programs that can weed out the folks that are really ready to do the work and the folks that are playing with an idea, there's a huge gap. So my question to all of you guys is to think about, like, for the young folks, what's the short-term commitment for them to play with an idea and realize if they're a good fit or not before they sink in a huge amount of time and energy? Because that's where...
But make this about gender.
Specifically for women.
Okay, for women.
Yeah.
Dealing with the childcare, dealing with construction as the case study we're using, and starting with childcare is a slow, torturous, not very fruitful approach right now. I know that's disappointing. I know, we want to deal with the childcare problem. We have a project here in Boston now that some of us have been partnering on, and there are so many contradictions. Everybody wants to figure out the answer to the childcare problem, but there are so many contradictions. If we don't dig deeper into those contradictions, we continually develop projects that are failing. We've got to get to someplace new, because here's the thing. Childcare is expensive. The workers are poorly paid. It can only work limited hours. We don't get any support from business for it. Business is completely off the hook when it comes to childcare. Rents are expensive to get spaces. The state regulations are expensive. We have a massive economic contradiction on the issue of childcare. And just sitting people in a room and asking, how can we get more childcare? Is that you over there, Mercedes? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought it was one of the women. I thought it was one of the women who actually works on that project. How can we get more childcare? Without going deeper into the contradictions in, frankly, let me use the word, in capitalism. The contradictions in capitalism that make it nearly impossible to effectively address the childcare issue for workers. So I don't mean that to be discouraging.
I would never want to contradict you in front of public.
Yeah, no, but go ahead. But this would be that opportunity?
And to what she said, that all being true, we do make some decisions in public policy on how we spend resources, and we make some decisions in public policy, particularly tied to developments, right? So one of the trends right now at the city is one of the community benefits or mitigating things that we're asking developers to do and we're asking companies to do is to provide childcare. Right, and so we are asking companies to think about childcare that allows for public, sort of the neighbors, to use it, but particularly for their workforce. And we are asking them to subsidize it, right, so that it's affordable childcare. We think this is about equity, and we think it's a policy matter that really matters. We don't really have those kind of, I mean, so everything you say is true, but if you find yourself, always, no, I'll never, if you find yourself in an opportunity where you're looking at a large development in Boston or in the Boston area, and they're talking about what the community benefits packages could be, think about childcare. Think about subsidized childcare.
Yeah.
And think about what we could do if we had a real network of subsidized childcare around the city.
And this is one thing that the city is doing really differently from previous administrations. The money in the past, the linkage money that was involved in development, was going into funds, and no communities really had no input into where that money was going. In fact, most people didn't even know where that money went. But being really concrete about what the community benefits agreements should be able to provide. I had a question here, and I'm going to keep going. Lots of them. Let's make it quick. And let's try to stay on topic. Okay.
It's all about the gender.
Yeah.
My name's Deirdre. I'm a retired 35-year member of Local 103 IBEW. I worked in the trades, in the trenches for 30 of those years, 5 of them as a contractor. So I'm very familiar with the apprenticeship, the pre-apprenticeship, and I'm grateful to have the union benefits that I've had. The question that I have now is, so far away from 1982 when I got out of my time, what is being done to retain the people? You get into the first year of apprenticeship, great, and then the graduation rate just crashes. At least it did for me in the 15 years following me. So there's a lot
Retention.
There's still locker room talk going on.
Yeah. Brian, back and forth. I would take core crews as one. Maybe you could take women's committees. You know, some of the structures we're building.
Right, no, I was just going to touch on that same point. So through the collectivism of union halls, we've been able to establish some of our women's committees, which gives them a space to face the challenges on their terms in their own committees. But they're fully supported by their union halls, and we're advancing more of those in the union halls. And we've also, I see Kathy Cassivan here, we've also partnered with Women in Leadership Development, WILD, to make sure that the union hall might know what's the best way to do it, because this is pretty new stuff for a lot of our folks. So we don't have the answers. Who do we go to that might have the right answers and the best ways to do it? And once we find out that information, how do we implement them in our union halls? That's one strategy, and there are others, but these are things we're looking at, because retention, as much as access, is important to a career. So,
And retention is a problem across gender, but one critical best practice that is being implemented across those $3 billion worth of construction is core crews. So a woman works for a subcontractor. You know, back when you started and when I started in the business, you were a company person. It was a negative. Now we're seeing that as a positive. You work for Sue. She takes you from one job to the next job to the next job. You're there from day one to last day. Over here, and then I'm going to go this side of the room. All right, right there.
Okay, how does the AFL-CIO with 501c3 reduce apprenticeship time for young women graduates of technical schools? In other words, I'm looking at tenure apprenticeship. I've heard this.
No, there's no apprentices that are longer than 5 years, and those are highly technical.
But how can they reduce that? Here we have women just coming right out of
Why?
technical school.
Why?
Why not?
Well, should we make college 2.5 years?
No, they've gone to technical school. They're a technical school.
Yes, but the demands, if you get out of here with a biology degree, or you get out of the IBEW with an electrical degree, the demands are higher probably in the electrical degree.
Susan, can I touch
Go
on
ahead.
this? May I touch on it for? I think it's a great question, and It's actually, it's pretty forward-looking, it's pretty progressive initiative. The building trades unions here have Madison Park High School, who is our flagship in the Boston region for serving VOTEC students. There have been local unions in the region who have developed curriculum that will double. So we are trying to figure out how do we put more of our training programs in the VOTECs based on curriculum that will have a direct correlation to what they'll see in the field, and then how do we provide credit for them so you actually, you do save time in your getting to your license or to your journey level status. It's pretty brand new stuff here, but we think it's a real option for retaining that talent coming out, for a direct pathway between the high school system into the career pathway system. So,
And on the other end, many of the union apprenticeship programs now have articulation agreements. So that while you're going through your 4 or 5 year apprenticeship, you are gaining college credits. And you're getting paid, and you're getting paid. Gail, did you have a hand up
I
there?
just want to say really quickly to echo Brian that that is cutting edge new stuff, and those conversations are happening, and particularly in some of these new grants, the American Apprenticeship Initiative and the Apprenticeship Expansion Grants. Some visionary folks are beginning to talk about that in bringing in women and more minorities into the building trades and to other registered apprenticeships too, but particularly focused on the building trades. What can we do in the pre-apprenticeship system? How do we so carefully align the training so that when somebody graduates from the building pathways or something similar, that they walk into the registered apprenticeship program already ready with credit for so many hours, so that there's a leg up. So I think that thinking is beginning to happen. So I just want to say really, really quickly, I mentioned Liz Skidmore, but I didn't mention Connecticut at all. That passionate person, there's now a Building Pathways New Hampshire, patterned after Massachusetts, and Liz has come, right, and in other parts of Massachusetts, but Liz has just recently come to Connecticut. She totally inspired the director of apprenticeship for the state, who then took Liz's words and inspired the commissioner of labor. And so, and again, thinking those visionary thoughts about how to do this in a much more, again, visionary way, so.
I want to. I'm sorry, I'm stepping on that, but I just want to leave a caution. Again, ask yourself the question. Many people are asking, how can we accelerate apprenticeship? Who is asking that question, and why are they asking the question? If in fact it's to try and get somebody through further to a good job, that's good. But if business is asking the question, how can we accelerate this? I question. I want my electrician to be absolutely qualified. I want the person who's going to put the sprinkler systems in. I spent time in India, let me tell you. You want the person who puts the sprinkler system in to be absolutely qualified. So again, I think those are longer term questions that, you know, we don't just ask, how do we make it shorter? We ask, why are we making it shorter and for whom? Okay, now how can we make it shorter? You've had your hand up right along.
Yeah, hi. I live in Oak Bluffs on the Vineyard, and when you talk about economic development and gender, a lot of our women who live there year-round, coming out of regional high school, end up working for $10 an hour for a certain part of the year. Problem with the Vineyard is that unions are not down there. With the public jobs, the unions come from off island.
Mm-hmm.
If we could get the unions on island, we are 6 rural towns, then we could do a lot with the economic development. I know probably most of the people in this room think the Vineyard is rich. We're not. Year-round, we're not. 6 rural towns. If we could get unions down there with our public jobs, we've recently built 2 bridges. Oak Bluffs is about to build a fire station. It would help our young women be sustainable. And we do have a comprehensive high school. How can that happen? The women down at the end, you were talking about pathways. Are you in rural communities, and do other rural communities have this issue? Thank you.
You wanted to say something, didn't you,
Well,
Marcy?
I was
saw
going to
you,
simply
yeah.
say move to Nantucket, because that's where our union is, and we actually need line workers, and I would love to hire you. But unfortunately, National Grid doesn't serve Martha's Vineyard, but we do serve Nantucket. And so if I can get you to move to Nantucket, we got a deal.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can
and
I
say- yeah.
can I just comment as well? The apprenticeship program that the state has is union and non-union. The most successful programs we have are union programs. The best graduation rates are union programs. But we have changed the mentality in this state. There's lots of non-union employers, and those employers, so you should be going to your cities and towns saying, the people that should be getting jobs and getting the work on in the towns are folks that have certified apprenticeship programs.
That,
We
nope.
just finished the bridge. It took 3 years to build. All right?
There's a bridge, I've been taking the ferry.
Yeah, no.
Oh.
3 years just finished, all right? And it was all union. So no one from Yarmouth was hired. My father used to say the whole city of Boston could hear me when I speak. So none of our none of our young people in Dukes County were hired for that bridge. Therefore, none of the money went to reliable markets, crony markets in the community there. That's why the union coming to rural communities is expensive because of public. You have to do unions when you do public projects. Thank you for letting me speak.
I'm just going to be, I'll
Yeah, John
be
has
really
a-
short and say this, right? Union is about workers organizing. Organize the people in Martha's Vineyard and get the people who are doing the projects to agree to all of the benefits, the wages, and everything else that the folks of Martha's Vineyard, deserve, right? And so you, my friend, don't need anybody. You are probably the best voice. So get with your local residents and neighbors and organize. And make sure that those folks that are representing you, any politician in any seat, should be listening to you about local numbers and making sure that the people who are working on those jobs are being treated fairly and have the benefits that they need. You could do it.
And I would say actually the people to get in touch with immediately to get some more information and help on that. There are very strong building trades councils in southeastern Mass, in Fall River and New Bedford. Those are the folks who are closest to you, who actually might be able to get on that bridge and come on over.
And just really quickly, I want to say to the question particularly, New Hampshire is very rural. And so there are patterns and there are models of working in rural areas on these kinds of programs. And much of Connecticut, quite frankly, outside the several big cities, is rural as well. We're working particularly in northeastern Connecticut. So there are models that will work not just in cities.
People are worried about the time. I'm going to call it at 20 past, so you get time to get upstairs, even though Elizabeth stepped on 10 minutes of our time. We still got time. Right here, and then I'm going to go over here. Yes. I had a cluster here. Okay, right here.
I'm one of the Metro West commissioners for the Commission on Status of Women, and on Wednesday night we had a meeting discussing how to help incarcerated women in Birmingham go back into society. And one of the barriers is retaining a job. We were talking about entrepreneurship, but I was wondering, have any of you actually thought about, or has there been any discussion about training incarcerated women?
Yeah. There's been lots of discussion, and we've got nothing on the ground here. Let me tell you about, in Los Angeles, well, maybe, Pipeline, no. Maine Works, yes, has a program, yes, and I'm being Boston-centric. I know. Maine Works does have a program. I was going to mention, it's outside of the New England of the conference, but Winter in Los Angeles has a fabulous program. It's exclusively devoted to women coming out. We've had discussions with the jail down at South Bay. They have a whole program for the men, and yet they don't have a program for the women. Marie's here someplace. Yes, Marie has been trying to work on that to try and make that leap. I wanted to emphasize that this is a Corey-free industry. So it is a prime industry for doing exactly that, developing those structures to move women, out of Framingham and into a job. Yeah, we can. Yeah, of course. The other thing is, yeah, that's who to talk to. Well, I'll tell you this is what PGTI does. So this is what we did around the child care issue. We got enough people in the room, we got enough people in the room that you can now meet and bring this issue to PGTI and see if we can step off a side project on that. This is what we did around the question of the girls. Well, for 5 years, well, we got to get young women, we got to get young women, we got to get young women. Now, we now have a project that's kind of off to the side but spun off of PGTI called Girls in Trades. It's in all the Voc Tech schools, starting clubs for the girls. We had a big event last May over at 103 at your Union Hall, the way they had to, a match. They had to shut down registration. They had so much demand. There'll be another event this spring for girls in the Voc Tech schools. So I only use that, again, the case study model, that spun off. This issue of, we're really interested in trying to open up opportunities for women coming out of incarceration. And Marie's the leading person, so let's have a conversation and see where we can go with that. Yeah, I'm going over here. That woman over there has had her hand up a long time. Yes, you.
So my question was also related to rural communities. I'm from Vermont. Prior to that, 10 years ago, I was from Maine. So I'm used to working and living in rural environments. There's a great example in urban centers where you were able to make some of this work and great strides. What about when you layer on top of that, what would you want to demonstrate is over an hour drive for them to get to a class? That the businesses in the area that are offering the jobs are all small businesses. They don't have the human resources, networks, they don't have the teams of people who have that energy to work on these pieces. I know we have some great efforts happening in Vermont, but mostly focused around our urban center up in Berlin. Great examples, but even some of that trickling down south is a challenge. So I'm going to hear like a few pieces of strategies to help put a push
Gail.
in rural areas.
And Sue.
It is definitely a challenge in rural areas, and transportation is a serious challenge. And quite frankly, we have to be honest with young women about the realities of construction. The jobs very often move from place to place, and you have to be able and willing to get to the work. So we don't want to sugarcoat that. And unfortunately, the reality is it's not for everybody if the transportation issues are insurmountable. But quite frankly, I have a dream about just something beyond construction, and it sort of aligns with Marcy. You think about related non-traditional jobs that are in local communities, and utilities are one. Utilities are in every community, and particularly if there are public utilities. But the one that's most of interest to me is water supply and pollution control. Water, local communities, or even small regions in rural states have water supply and wastewater treatment facilities. The jobs are very similar to construction. They are excellent jobs. Very often, they are, not totally, but very often, even in rural states, they are the unionized jobs with people who represent public sector workers. And I would like to take the building pathways model and move it into water supply and pollution control, and it can work everywhere, urban and rural. And that's my dream.
Sue, did you want to add something to
Just a quick thing. A lot of these joint apprenticeship training programs in the building trades are developing incredible online programs. So more and more, I think there's going to be access to some of this training online, and I think that will be useful.
I would also like, as a caution, I think the model that Gail is talking about is coming from the pre-apprenticeship and the unionized sector. The green energy sector has been an example of what is wrong with, in many aspects, what is wrong with the workforce development model. Many of those green energy jobs, first of all, the sector is largely non-union outside of the work that the IBEW has done. And those jobs, there has been I think it's been staved off, but under the stimulus bill, the Obama stimulus bill, that reinforced creating another women's occupation that is underpaid compared to men doing the same work. The green energy work is the same work that people do in construction. But if it is an industry that is created, dominated by women, and the wages are substandard, then that's not a solution either to women's economic equality or to our energy problems. Women need good jobs in every new sector that's created. Somebody want to give a wrap up here? That was it? Thank you very much. We're right on time.